2018 is ending relatively soon, I mean in a matter of weeks at this point, and through that we are reaching the end of, well, the year 2018, of course. And not everything that has come out this year has been spectacular. To be honest, in my opinion, it's been a relatively lame year when it comes to a lot of games. A lot of games I were excited for were, well, disappointing, and a lot of games that I was excited for did what I expected them to, which is always nice, but there were some big losers in this year's rotation or even just release schedule, however you look at it. And I'm not going to even talk about just games solely. I'm going to talk about just the biggest losers, what I define to really have set something and ruined another thing because of it. And of course, these don't lose on the same level as each other. They're not in any particular order. It's just how I view it. So the first entry is kind of going to set the tone for the rest of them and how I view a loser. There are some games, of course, that come out and make zero money. That's not the goal. I'm not pointing out economic winnings or losing or how much money was made. I'm not looking at that. I'm not looking at how creative it was, how groundbreaking it was. That's not my main goal. My main goal is to kind of just look back and pick out the 5 biggest losing moments in 2018 for gaming, in my opinion anyway. Mostly because I am biased on my own opinions, so this is going to be almost series oriented once you get down to it. So let's start with the first one, and you'll know what I'm talking about as we go. So the first one is Metal Gear Survive. Metal Gear Survive came out February 20th, very early on in the year. To be honest, everyone's probably forgotten about this. And it was a survival type action-adventure game developed by Konami, of course. And it was developed following Hideo Kojima's departure, which is one of the first games since Snake's Revenge without Kojima's input. So it's a little rough, and to be honest, when I first played it back in March, I did not play it at release. It was not the worst thing I've ever played. I felt it was blown out of proportion. It was kind of just, it was average, but people kept nitpicking at it until death. And to be honest, Konami is 100% at fault. The microtransactions were just terrible. The constant internet connection requirement was just, why? If it's so lackluster, why do that? And to be honest, the recycled basically skin from Metal Gear Solid 5 was kind of off-putting. It makes you feel like this was a cheap game. But I felt like it was almost too negative. It wasn't necessarily that people went after it for the wrong reasons. It's just they went after the same reason over and over and over to the point where it was beat to hell and it just disappeared and it didn't sell well. And I'm not saying that it should have sold well. To be honest, it probably could have sold a little better and I would have been fine with it, but it felt like Konami set the stage for people to ramp up on it and just run it for them. A lot of negative opinions went into this and affected the sales. Overall, Metal Gear Survive was probably an average game at best, maybe a below average if you really want to take it down, but it's ultimately the fan base of the other Metal Gear series and games that kind of killed it, which is entertaining to think of. But overall, Metal Gear Survive is probably not the most average game that came out this year, but just the most kind of why was it being down kind of game, or that's my opinion anyway on that. Overall, I'd probably give it an average score. It's also not that memorable, which most Metal Gear Solid games are, so I guess that's why people were kind of mad. The next big loser, or this one is a little, not really a loser, this is more of kind of rough. It depends on your definition. I feel like it lost. But Dark Souls Remastered. I'm a big fan of Dark Souls. Getting that out of the way. I'm also a big fan of Metal Gear, but I didn't mention that for some reason. But Dark Souls, I'm a big fan. And I've played quite a bit of the Souls series in general. I love playing Neo as well. I just love the style, and sometimes I like to punish myself by playing those games if I feel they are hard, which I don't find them that difficult, but some people do. And overall, what was Remaster set out to do? Well, to remaster, be a touch-up. It wasn't going to be a big thing. They added more players into lobbies. They were better internet, better dedicated servers. What else? I'm trying to remember. Overall, just a touch-up. It was a slight touch-up. Nothing too big was done with it. But, and of course, the 60 frames per second, that's added every time now. And they added password matchmaking. I forgot about that. And that's pretty much it. It was a remaster, and that's fine. But it's really what they didn't do and what they had already previously done and not fixed. If you've ever played the original PC port of Dark Souls, Prepare to Die Edition, it is horrible. You cannot get that to work without making sure you download a mod, which is fine if you didn't come out with another version and then block access to the version we've already modded and try and get us to buy a new one just because you were too lazy to fix the old one. It really set a dangerous tone for how that was going to go down. Dangerous. Just, ugh. It really made me feel like this was going to be a cheap cash grab, and it kind of was. And there's a couple other things why. And the reason it's not that big of a step up. When you look at the remastered version versus the original, you can see some differences, but overall, it's not too big of a step up. It's not that great of a remaster. And it's not even because they didn't fix a lot of stuff. It's because it doesn't look like a game that came out in 2018. You have to remember, the original Dark Souls came out in 2011. That's 7 years. You're telling me you could not freaking fix some issues, some textures? Some textures look fixed, or not fixed, but beautified, while others look somehow worse because they're right next to better looking stuff. And overall, it's just, it doesn't work. Like, even if you mod the original PC and you get a DS fix and you install that, it at some areas it looks better than the remastered edition, which was done by one person. That's my opinion on if it looks better. That's opinionated. Some people like the remastered edition. I'm not going to poke fun at that, but you can tell in the remastered edition that some areas just look odd because they fixed, or they made it cleaner, or they did this to a certain corner, and then the other corner right next to it is not. It's not beautified at all. It looks terrible. Some exploits were not taken out, which was kind of weird because they did they got rid of cloning or duping as well. They got rid of a bunch of stuff, but they didn't. The most annoying thing that they got rid of or didn't get rid of for me was chain backstabbing. I've always been irritated by it. I hate going in PvP and getting chain backstabbed just because I either lag or they lag or I make a mistake and I'm dead because of it. Which is fine if you're talking like extreme PvP, but when it's supposed to be kind of a back and forth battle, it's not very fun to get chain backstabbed at all. Yeah, that's just terrible. So the next loser to talk about is not really a game, it's actually a game development studio, or it was. Now, there are plenty of game studios that close every year and open every year and go bankrupt and do terrible and do good and exist, but Telltale, which you should know, closed this year, which is, to me, is not very sad. I'm not a big fan of their games. I enjoyed the original Walking Dead. I thought it was a nice, almost a nostalgia trip to adventure games from the 90s. I'm a big fan of LucasArts for their early 90s games like that. But it's kind of the reason they disappeared is that first person shooters and 3D games and all this kind of took over, kind of stole the spotlight. And that's fine because, to be honest, those adventure games were pretty limited. And also, they're only fun for one playthrough. You can't really go back and do something drastically different. Yeah, you can maybe get some different dialogue or you can get a different ending, but overall, there's only a limited amount you can do. Now, when it comes to Telltale, I won't lie, they did a great job at presenting The Walking Dead. And heck, even the few games after, such as The Wolf Among Us and Season 2 of The Walking Dead, were done incredibly well. I'm not going to say they weren't. But overall, the creativity of the later games that came out near the end and also probably the middle of Telltale's life were lackluster and unoriginal. They were using the same formula over and over. Upper management had no idea how to create an environment for creativity, which is a weird sense. And it seems like there was a lot of burnout. And that's ultimately why it failed. Because when you get too much upper management control, lower management either doesn't thrive. What they do is they fight back, which creates conflict, which doesn't do anything. Or they get so oppressed they feel like they can't make that one inspirational jump that will make a game. All it needs is that one inspirational jump and that game will be remembered forever. But because he's maybe too hounded by his manager or his design leader, he's unable to really think of ideas or maybe put forth his own little change that would radically overall just revolutionize the game. And so overall, Telltale failed because of its lack of management experience and lack of slow growth, which is kind of weird because Telltale grew exceptionally fast. 2012 came around and it just grew and grew and grew, went from a small company to a middle-sized company, or development team, I shouldn't say company. And it got all these licenses, got all these project turnarounds it had to do, and overall it was going somewhere. But it grew too fast. It's kind of the thing where you have a pair of pants when you're 12 and you gain 6 inches and maybe you gain like 20 pounds and you don't fit in those pants anymore, but you can't afford any other pants, so you have to deal with it. And so you're kind of just stuck. And that's kind of the analogy I use for Telltale. It's not mostly they're the biggest loser in companies. There are a bunch of other companies that closed down in gaming this year, but it's kind of the most prominent in recent times. And also, it's probably the one I was the least surprised about, or the least willing to cry, because, to be honest, I wasn't a fan of their latter half of games. The next big loser, no surprise, and this actually hurts me to see this series even close to a losing section, is Fallout 76. Now, I want to preface this real quick. I'm a big fan of every Fallout game that has come out besides Fallout Shelter. It's an alright game. Fallout Shelter is an alright game. I enjoy the first two, Tactics, Brotherhood of Steel. I enjoy all of those. I am a big fan of Fallout 3. A huge fan. I'm a big fan of Fallout New Vegas, and I was still a fan of Fallout 4. Not as much as 3, but I still liked it. It was enjoyable. Now, when it comes to Fallout 76, I was wary, and I'll be honest, I did not buy it. I waited until someone I knew got it, and I played it for an hour, and that's what I'm going off of. Now, what makes this game the biggest loser is not the gameplay, actually. It's kind of amazing that this didn't lose because of the gameplay. To be honest, the gameplay is mediocre to maybe above average. It's a decent survival effort. It's not the greatest I've ever seen. It's not the worst I've ever seen. It kind of takes a different almost drastic change to the formula that we know from Fallout. A single player with a variety of different choices, explore, craft, repair, stuff like that. And it takes too much of a drastic change, making it online, use teamwork, crafting's required, stuff like that. And overall, it's too drastic. It's almost like they were trying to skip ahead and they completely went too far. They like jumped over the cliff when they were trying to jump right directly on it. They just fell off. So it's an odd thing to see a Fallout game done this badly. And Bethesda's not known for having the cleanest games when it comes to bugs or even issues, but they still work. And Fallout 76 doesn't work. It still doesn't, even after numerous patches. And I actually went over yesterday to my friend's house who owns it, and he hasn't played it since I went over the previous week. And overall, we tried it, and we got an immediate crash. And then we tried to play for a half hour, and we got bored. It was very lackluster. I'm a big fan of couch co-op, so we would trade controllers, and that's how we would play. But even with that, and making jokes and having fun with someone that I know very well, it still just lacked personality. It's almost like it was empty. And the online only kind of sucks. I really hate online only as an idea for a video game, but I understand it's almost becoming the norm, and I'm just not a big fan. Also, the microtransactions in that game are horrible. Not even that it's all cosmetic, which is fine, and I'm a big fan of cosmetic-only microtransactions. But when you make them really bad, like $5 for a freaking blue hat, it's kind of irritating. And we get to our next big loser, number 5, which is Battlefield 5. And I kind of wish I could have put EA here, just the whole company, but we won't go that far. So to be honest, Battlefield 5 isn't as... I don't want to say it's as bad as the rest of the games here. It's ultimately probably going to be more enjoyable than all of them, of the other 3 I mentioned. Besides maybe Dark Souls. It depends how you look at the remaster. But if you've played Battlefield 1, you've played Battlefield 5. And I understand that's very simple and kind of too... not that transparent of a sense where you kind of get the idea. But what I'm trying to say is it's very similar style, which isn't a surprise. And overall, it feels too similar. And you can kind of see why based on their development schedule. I mean, this is pretty soon after Battlefield 1, so overall it's kind of meh. But the big issue I have with Battlefield 5, well, 2 of them. One, everything is coming soon. I am recording this, and today, December 4th, training or practice, or was it shooting gallery or firing range, something like that. It's the practice mode to show off your guns or maybe try some recoil stuff or stuff like that is now available today. Not at launch, which is just amazing. You think that would be in the game. I was blown away by the fact that it could be in the game, but you can't access it because they blocked it. It's mind-boggling how bad that is. A lot of stuff isn't in the game, and what my biggest issue is that you have bigger reviewer sites that are kind of saying it's good, but it'll ultimately be decided by this or this mode that comes out later. Well, it's not in the game now, so review the game as it is. There's not a lot of content there. It's almost like because they're not going to do a season pass, they were like, well, they're going to get free content. Might as well give them the bottom of the barrel type of content, which the maps are very forgettable. For a first-person shooter, I've never had maps be that forgettable. I'd argue 4 of the 8 maps were decently, like, you can have a decent amount of fun. One of them was really good. I'm not going to completely shit on it. Aerodrome, fantastic. I really enjoy that map, and it's the only map name I memorized because it was really fun to play. Air battles were poor. It's amazing that Battlefront 1 that came out so long ago had better air battles than Battlefield 5, which came out this year. That's amazing. It actually almost feels like Call of Duty in some of the shooting. Kind of reminds me of Modern Warfare 2 almost, with the type of time to kill or how many shots it takes, so to say. It's very rough. To be honest, I feel like this was almost rushed out, and it works, and it's a decent game. I'd say it's average or below average. It's not that bad, and it'll probably get better as we go. But as of right now, I wouldn't touch the game in this year. It lacks what I prefer from Battlefield, and it's not even that what I prefer is generally like an outlier from the series. It's just kind of lacking. I find it almost as an insult. I feel bad for DICE because this is partly responsible, or this game is partially a effect of EA being the master, in quote, so to say. But the biggest issue is that for me overall is that it lacks the Battlefield feel. It's so weird because it feels like Battlefield 1, but it's stepped far enough away where to be honest, I don't think I'm playing Battlefield. I actually don't. So, and that's not even to mention the overall just poor trailers and poor build up to this game. I feel like the trailers missed the mark. The entire advertisement for it was very poor. I don't even know, and I'm not even gonna touch upon female playable characters or anything. I don't care enough about that to really get involved in that, but the fact it was brought up and stayed there for long enough for me to hear more about that than the actual game is very sad. So, yeah, I'm just gonna end this because I'm starting to think about Battlefield 5 too much, and I'm getting a little mad. But those are the 5 biggest losers for 2018 for me anyway. There's a couple other games that I would have liked to talk about, but I felt like they didn't really hit me personally enough where I kind of just ignored them, so to say. The reason I probably took these more personally, I want to say, was Metal Gear Survive. I enjoy Metal Gear Solid. I really do. One of my favorite game series. Dark Souls, again, Dark Souls Remastered. Big fan of Dark Souls. Telltale, the reason I took this a little personally was because I did enjoy their original work. And also it was kind of a nostalgia trip back to the early 90s for those LucasArts games. And I kind of enjoyed it, but later I didn't. So it's not that big of a personal hit, but it's also fun to talk about. Not that people lost their jobs, but that you can fail even if you have everything going for yourself. Fallout 76. I'm a big fan of Fallout. It's probably my biggest series that I'm talking about that I'm like a big fan of. I love Fallout 3. Love it. And the fact Fallout 76 sucks is just horrible. I'm so sad. I'm glad I didn't buy it, and I freaking went and stole someone else's time for it because I'm not wasting money on it. And Battlefield 5, I'm kind of can I just call it 5 because it doesn't feel like Battlefield. So yeah, those are the biggest losers. In my opinion, of course, it's always my opinion. Very opinionated, apparently. I will probably be talking about probably the 5 biggest winners, in my opinion, what blew past expectations. And I already have quite a few ideas for it, but probably next week. Mostly because there's a game coming out this week, and you probably already know, but I'm pretty hyped for it, so I didn't want to talk about it here. So I hope to see you guys next time with whatever I'm talking about, and of course, as always, till then.